Welcome to the Helping Homes Find Their People podcast, where we dive into the world of real estate with the Galluzzo Team, Elena, Chris, and Christo. Join us as we explore the stories, insights, and strategies that help homes find their perfect match. In today's episode, we're excited to welcome special guests Helen Manfre, the Principal at Freedom Land Title Agency, and Nicole Palumbo, the Counsel at Freedom Land Title Agency. Get ready for an informative and engaging conversation that delves into the vital role of the title agencies in the home buying process. Let's jump in. Thank you guys for coming today. How is everyone doing?
Doing well.
Thank you. Well.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great. And
happy to be here with the Galluzzo team.
And we're happy to have you guys.
Well, we're happy to have you because you know, your company is really one of the expert companies on Long Island. You really understand the industry. Helen, you happen to be a family friend of ours for 80 years?
At least.
So we're excited to have you on, and it's going to be really, you can give us a lot of background on title. Most people buying houses, selling houses have no idea what goes on with title agencies. They don't, most realtors don't even know what's going on with title agencies. So we'd love to hear some interesting perspective on what's going on, the nuances, the laws, and what exactly you guys do.
In a brief nutshell, title insurance is going to ensure your buyer that the home they're purchasing is free and clear of any liens or encumbrances. You don't want to inherit anybody else's problems. We make sure that we disclose those potential problems before you close. COs, permits.
What's a CO?
Certificate of occupancy.
Okay.
A permit, a building violation. While not actually part of an insured title search, we provide those because you need them. We let the seller know that, hey, your client has no CO for their pool or, for the deck. And the buyer, for the same reason, you don't want to close without that. On a more legal end, which Nicole helps us with, there are many problems that can follow the chain of title. And the chain of title will go back to the beginning of time, the beginning of the creation of that home when that home was built, or even prior to that if it was vacant land. So we want to make sure that our Galluzzo team represents people that have a great closing and post-closing have no issues. Title insurance is a one-time premium. It's fixed by the state of New York based on the purchase price and the loan amount. You pay for it once. It's the best deal that you can ever have in insurance, one time only. And the premium for that policy is forever that you own that house, providing you don't change title. Unlike any other insurance that reoccurs every month or every year, one stop. It's a great investment. So for those people to say, well, I don't really think I want to get a title policy, think again, because if you do have a problem post-closing, you need to rely on that policy.
Asking that, I have a couple of clients over the years that have purchased cash, and they're not required to get a title policy. Is that true?
Yeah, so with title insurance for the fee policy, it's optional. And actually with the changes that they did, when they brought in the CD, the closing disclosure, one of the things that you actually have to add to the closing disclosure is the title insurance for owner, optional. So it is optional, but it's definitely something that's definitely recommended. We have a case now where it's an investor and he flips the houses very quickly. And he bought this house without title insurance. The fee policy, no fee policy. So typically when we see there's prior owner issues on a policy or on a title, we contact the prior insurer. So we contacted who recorded the deed, and they said, oh no, we didn't insure it. So we couldn't just use that policy then to clear this open mortgage of record. So now him and his attorney have to go and get a SAT for this mortgage and clear it all up on their own when, it's probably going to cost him more to get that done between his attorney's fees and the satisfactions getting recorded than it would if he would have just, gotten title insurance on that property.
And the title insurance premium actually pays for the cost of your defense. So if there is a claim to title, we, the title insurance company, and we're agents for many of the other head underwriters, First American, Fidelity, Chicago. I'm an agent for them, an authorized agent. So if you have a claim and you have a problem, rather than going out and hiring your own lawyer, you bring the claim to us, we defend it for you. So again, you get a lot of bang for the buck for that premium because you don't have to pay for your own legal defense.
So it gives you the most protection, and you can fight anything after that.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it does insure from the day of closing back. So
Right, doesn't insure
It
forward.
doesn't insure forward like stuff that the insured would do. But, if there's any issues that come up related to, that chain of title or how the property was when you bought it, it would cover those types of issues.
What could be an issue?
The prior owner mortgages are a big one, because sometimes satisfactions, they don't get recorded at your closing when you buy, when your seller's paying off a mortgage. So that's a big issue. So if you have that policy, typically that will clear that issue, right off the bat.
Everything has to get recorded in the county clerk's office. That's what we live and die by. Any county clerk, the registrar's office, it's in the 5 boroughs. If it's not of record, we don't know about it. So, if your Nana transferred title to you and said, oh, here's the house and here's a piece of paper, but you never recorded that, technically she conveyed title to you with a deed, but she never recorded it. We put everything of public record so that anybody else that's interested in that property or has an issue with it knows what the status is. SATs of mortgage, you pay off your mortgage, the banks, they don't record the SAT, which leaves your mortgage open of record. We know you paid it off, but I have to give clear title to the new buyer. Even though that lien is paid off, I don't want that on the record. You have to get rid of that. So Nicole has to go searching back who the prior insurer was and, how can we get rid of it? Adverse possession, fences, claims, unpaid taxes. I mean, the list, if someone dies and there's an heir that says, wait, I was entitled to a piece of that house and you sold it. And, the list really does go on and on. But for the most part, if you're a good diligent title company and you know who your clients are and you do your work, you can, make sure that your buyer is well represented.
So I have an interesting point. A friend of mine was selling a building that was in her family for 80 years in Brooklyn. During the title search, it turned out that her grandfather had 2 children that nobody knew about. And then when they sold the building for $5 million, those 2 children came forward and were entitled to money. So what has happened in something like that?
Yeah, well, that's when title insurance would kick in, at least for the buyer who bought that. If they then came and made a claim, that would be something that, the title insurance company would then defend, in that litigation. That's kind of an interesting, issue there, because I'm just wondering who was entitled. I guess it was the grandfather, right? And then I imagine the estate did an administration proceeding, but if they didn't know about these heirs, you're taking title out of the administrator, it's gone through the surrogate's proceeding. You think that, everything is fine and, that there's no issues and the administrator has a right to transfer it or do whatever. And then, transfer the funds for the estate and to the different heirs. So that's kind of interesting too. And typically in that situation, if it was an administration and, there's consideration on the deed, typically that would follow the money and not the property usually. So that's one of the things that we kind of take good in, that's why we always want, if it's coming out of an estate, we always want consideration on the deed,
airship affidavit,
to show that, and then typically it follows the money and not the actual property.
Property or land.
But if something did happen, that's when having title insurance would be very important, come in and defend in that situation.
Right. And think about it, for the one-time premium they paid for that policy, we defend that. And the cost of litigation in just New York alone, it can be exorbitant. It's a lot of money to hire an attorney, go to court multiple times, because it's not only, it's over years potentially. And that's what the title insurance policy does.
Yeah, I watch Suits. On episodes of Suits, I see they go to court a lot.
They do.
Has there any thing that came up ever like that just you weren't able to get to the closing because something bad came up on title, or it can always be figured out?
Our inability to insure,
There has been
there are definitely
there are
cases,
situations.
sure,
Yeah.
when we say this is uninsurable, and I'll preface it by saying Freedom Land won't insure it. Maybe another company would. Everybody has their own criteria, but yeah, there's definitely a scenario to say, look, I can't guarantee that this is good title, good
Yeah.
marketable title. How can I give a policy if I really can't guarantee that there are any outstanding heirs or
Sometimes if there's litigation involving the
Pending
property,
litigation.
a lot of times it can't be resolved or they won't resolve it, then that kind of situation.
What's a sample of a litigation that might happen?
two partners that sue one another? They own the building.
Right.
One's buying the other one out. Sounds great. But they have litigation that's pending, maybe unrelated to the real property, but they're in the middle of a huge, multi-million-dollar battle. And this real property, this building, is going to be swept into that litigation, which means how could we potentially insure it knowing that I don't know who's going to win the battle, who's going to be the victor of that litigation that's going to get that property. So potentially.
And sometimes if in foreclosure situations, if they haven't done the foreclosure properly, there's been certain instances where we just can't insure it because of just, left out, didn't serve certain parties, or, it's one of these things where there's potentially under, different statutes that maybe the foreclosed owner can come back. There's a lot of surplus money, things like that. Something odd with the foreclosure. So there's situations like that. That's the biggest one I think I've seen is with foreclosures, just not being able to insure because there's just problems with the actual action.
New York State
Yeah.
has very strict laws about how they foreclose. And unlike, other states where you have, nail it on the front door, run, you're out, you've been served, and, you have 90 days, 30 days to get out of the property, whatever. New York is not like that. So if it's coming out of a foreclosure, we have to be really, really careful that all those steps were followed and that there is nobody that is going to come back and go, no, that was my house.
Yeah. So what if someone does, let's say, squat? Like just stay in the house? What would happen if there's a squatter? Are you able to get that done or?
Yeah, if there's a squatter, sure. In certain situations, we like to get vacancy affidavits, especially foreclosures, because then basically if the foreclosed owners aren't living there anymore, that kind of solves a world of problems. And we can kind of take the property's vacant. There's probably nobody coming back. They've moved out. They've moved on with their lives. We feel more comfortable ensuring that. But in a situation where there's either the foreclosed owner remains or there's, a holdover tenant or there's, squatters where they're living, they're not authorized, they never had a lease or anything like that. With those kinds of things, there's an exception that's typically in all policies, rights of tenants and persons in possession. So that kind of protects the title company because these kinds of squatters and things of that nature, they're not of record. So there's no way the title company could really know about that unless somehow we're informed or we see
realtors
something.
Yeah.
tell
The
us.
realtors tell us. Typically they don't.
Well, they're supposed to.
That kind of thing. But the buyer should know because the buyer should know what they're getting. So typically, they understand that they're buying these properties with rights of tenants and persons in possessions and people like that. So their ownership rights are subject to, those people. And, in order to get the property, they may have to do an eviction proceeding depending on what type of, say, person is living there.
It's a big problem, and I think that's why we started, today speaking with you and with, Elena. The instance of squatting and holdover tenants has become a big problem since COVID. Foreclosed houses, ghost houses, houses that are in the process of being foreclosed. Most people remain in the house. They say, why should I leave? I can live here for free until the bank kicks me out, but not always.
Yeah.
So the house remains vacant. So now you have an empty house, and there are people that are very good at finding them and moving people in. And they make believe they were the owner, and the neighbors are usually pretty happy because there's finally somebody mowing the lawn. They painted it, they kind of cleaned it up. They don't really care who owns it. They're just happy that somebody's in there. They move somebody in and they charge them rent.
Yeah.
The tenant thinks that they actually are renting from the owner. They don't know. Again, it's fraud is the number one claim to title. I think we could agree. A fraudulent act by the buyer or by the seller is the number one claim to title. So if they come in and they're now in possession of this property, how do you get them out? You have to evict them. They have no right to be there. They don't own it. And they don't have to leave. You have to literally start an eviction proceeding, which in this state of New York, Suffolk County, whatever, it could take months to evict.
I actually called Suffolk today because
did.
the sheriff's office because I was curious, how long does it take from the time you get the warrant of eviction, the sheriff gets it to the actual eviction. So the woman I spoke with, she says, a couple of months. I was like, oh, so like 2 months? She's like, no, probably a lot longer. It seemed like more like 4 to 6 months,
Wow.
Or longer, the way she was saying. So, yeah, so it's
And that's
it's definitely
after
a long
the
process.
judge issues
Right.
an eviction notice.
Right.
It's
Correct.
still 4 to 6 months.
Yeah,
Correct.
could be.
So no matter what, you're looking at a year.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Right. So as from a realtor standpoint, it's a great house. It's it has all the bells and whistles you really want to list in, but you have to factor that 6 to 12 months in before you could really get to a closing table. And providing that all goes well,
Yeah. If you can even get into the house to show it, those types of things.
and that they don't destroy it, and that's
Yeah.
a big problem too. There was a case in Nassau County where there was a holder, I believe it was in Westbury. They were there for almost 13 years. It was pretty famous. It's been in and out of the newspaper. 13 years. And when they finally left, the bank foreclosed on them. It took forever to get them out. The successful bidder from the auction with the bank wanted to get in and, get into the house that he owned. He could not. He had to evict them. And when he finally got in, the house was absolutely trashed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage because they could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen instances of people leaving the water running.
Yeah.
That
So
they
they
did.
move out
Yeah.
and they leave the water running. So you have a pool in the basement.
That's what they did.
It's very, it's very tough. They remove kitchens, they remove the copper pipes. They go sell everything, and then you're left with nothing in a pool and a lot of mold. So it really kind of ruins the house. It's really shameful that the government allows this to happen. It's just a nightmare. They really have to do something about this.
Foreclosure laws in New York, and eviction as well, it all has to do with service. So in order for me to say, we're foreclosing on you, you have 90 days, we filed a lis pendens, they have to give you a piece of paper. And it can't be in the mail, and they actually have to serve you. You have to sign for it. It has to be with a delivery. Usually they send, you can't even do FedEx anymore. They serve.
They used to do nail and mail.
Yeah, there's
There was a
different
nail
kinds
and
of
mail.
service that is good. I mean, there's personal service, substitute service.
Service.
If they can't
If they can't
get
find
the
them,
person, so there's different kinds. And then nail and mail if they can't get the person.
they can't get them. But
you
that
know,
could take years.
Yeah.
And those are all good service, and actually, when a title company does see that kind of service, that raises red flags because they really weren't personally didn't get the paper in hand. It was either their cousin or their aunt got it for them, or it was a nail and mail situation. So typically, with that, we always raise a exception that to the report that possible rights of the foreclosed owner, that wasn't proper service. They might not know about it, so it's kind of an exception like that. And typically with the vacancy affidavit, that usually the brokers will give, we can omit that.
Yeah.
But that, that type of service does raise questions, on the title end.
So you'd basically need that guy in the car waiting for them
Yeah.
to walk into the house and be like, I got you.
That's our favorite kind of service. Yeah. We want to see that service, that affidavit, personal service.
Or at the Grammys.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the famous one at the Grammys or one of the Oscars where
Somebody was
the
served.
process server comes and serves a woman? He goes, by the way, you are now the winner. And she grabbed it out of his hand and he goes, You've been served.
Oh, wow.
Wait, that actually happened at an award show?
I have to Google
yeah.
Who was that?
It wasn't about real estate. It was his divorce.
Oh,
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, she
my
was
goodness.
avoiding, and he got her at the award show.
Wow.
Right up on stage.
that's
Very-
insane.
Very interesting. You have to do what you have to do.
Well, we would prefer not seeing anything like personal services, obviously the best.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, those exceptions that we raise in the title report, so then we send them, and we have good relationships with all our realtors, and we send them a copy of the report, and they're like, what's this? So it's like,
Yeah.
But typically they know or should know that it's a house in foreclosure, and sometimes they don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes, people list the home and everything's great and make absolutely no disclosure at all that they're in foreclosure or,
Yeah.
pretty close to it.
The seller does not tell him anything.
Never.
They
They have no judgments, no leads. They're not in foreclosure, and they're great people
Mm-hmm.
until we deliver the title report.
Yeah.
You know what is the rule about fences? Like sometimes you hear if a fence is out of possession. So explain the whole thing to us. A fence is out of possession when it's on somebody else's property, or give me the
Yeah, this
description
happens
of
more
that.
often than
Yeah.
not.
Because this is really
This is
Yeah.
like
90% of the
Oh my
title
goodness.
issues that we come across
I think for
are
us too.
fence
For us too.
issues.
Yeah.
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 Well, fences are never where they should be. I think that's safe to say. Someone goes and gets a fence, and they don't have the survey provided to the fence company to say, look, this is our record line. You have to put the fence on the record line, at least close to it. So if you're off your record line, you could do two things. You could either create a possession issue whereby your neighbor has the right after a certain period of time to say, hey, I've mowed the lawn, I've planted a garden there, and I've maintained it for over 10 years.
Yeah. and
Is
so-
10 years a number?
So under the statute,
It's a
adverse
statute,
possession
adverse
is
possession.
10 years, and there's other things they have to meet under the statute for that. But with title, the standard is 1 foot. So if the fence is misplaced, say inside your property, like 1 foot or under, title company doesn't raise an out of possession. They raise that the fence varies with the record line. But anytime you go over 1.1 or above, typically they're going to raise an out of possession, usually, unless there's some other kinds of factors that they don't have to. But that's it. So if the fence is inside your property over a foot, typically that's going to raise the out of possession issue. And then, typically a title company wants to get an affidavit from the neighbor stating that they make no claims to that area, that the fence was placed there,
error.
in a neighborly way, like nobody's trying to create any out of possession issue. If it's the actual seller's fence, it's our fence, we put it up. It's only been put up for 5 years, and then, sometimes some language is in there that, we can take down the fence, if we want to put it to the record line. But, typically an affidavit from the neighbor, will solve that issue. A lot of times you can't get an affidavit from the neighbor because they don't want to give it, or they give it to their attorney. Their attorney goes and just, makes it into
it
this
apart.
huge thing.
Yeah.
So then in that situation, typically we want to get some pictures of the area, because sometimes, like, a fence is misplaced because there's a tree or there's bushes or it's all overgrown and it's all woods, or it's a hill that goes straight down. So, there's nobody's possessing that. Nobody's going to be using that. So typically in that situation, we can take an affidavit from the seller saying, nobody's made any claims to that area, that it's, this is why the fence is misplaced. And then we have the picture, so we kind of feel comfortable, okay, we can omit the out of possession in that situation. But that's, typically the standard. If it's under a foot, we don't have to raise the out of possession.
Does that have to be filed with any kind of municipality?
So, sometimes you can file a boundary line agreement. So if the out of possession is really big, you're talking 5 feet, or we're talking like a garage encroachment or something else, it's rather large. It could be an issue. You might want to record a boundary line agreement. That would be recorded in the property, in the clerk's office where the property is located. And it kind of just sets forth that this is our boundary. We quit claim everything from this side of the boundary to you, and you quit claim everything from this side of the boundary to me. And that we, this is the boundary.
And it runs with the land.
Yeah, that would run with the land.
That stays with the land in perpetuity, whereas a fence affidavit is only good for this transaction. It's only good for the time that you buy and sell. The next time he goes and sells, he's got to get another fence affidavit. Typically, we try to do a fence affidavit, like Nicole said, unless it's a very, very large land, or if they're litigious neighbors. If they're at each other and they're not going to, then get the boundary line agreement, and nobody could ever say, this is mine or this is yours. We've established.
Yeah.
And we look at also like where the property is, like maybe if it's out in the Hamptons, people might be more litigious there. So we might be like, oh, we should probably get a boundary line agreement. Where if, it's maybe somewhere else and, Up Island, maybe then it would feel comfortable with a fence affidavit. So it, depends on all those factors, what works best. And we try to work with the client to make it as easy as we can, for them to get things cleared and get things closed and, try to come up with, all the solutions we can to to make the deal go through.
We've seen a lot of instances like that. And I think that's one of the reasons you hire an expert realtor. The Galluzzo team, we see it a lot. We know how to handle it. We know how to go to the neighbors and negotiate a smart transactional move so that there is no issues, because there could be. We don't want there to be major issues. We don't want to be adversarial positions between the buyer, seller, and the neighbor.
No hotheads.
So we're very good at it. So that's why you hire an expert realtor. We're knowledgeable.
And we do reach out to the realtors because, to have the record owner of the property approach his neighbor sometimes, not always the best idea, whereas the realtor seems to come in with a little bit better of a
bottle of wine.
A bottle of wine.
Just did it.
Just looking to
Intake
make
fills.
this happen.
Yeah.
Right,
Bottle of
exactly.
wine, a little box of cookies,
Sign here.
and we made it happen.
I have one question regarding, so let's say there's state property and they fence it around and it's been over 10 years. Does that count? Or state's like, no, that's for ours forever.
Yeah, I don't think it works with the
It won't
state.
work. Yeah, no one
we
would
could
work.
try. I would have to research that a little bit, but my understanding is probably not with with state property. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just lucky you have it for a certain time.
Yeah.
That's right.
Until
Until
they
the state-
knock on the door.
Yeah,
Says, hey, you're on my property for the
Yeah.
last 10
Right.
years.
yeah, you can get a license right, to
Exactly.
use it.
But that is
Yeah.
a good question because, if you look in Nassau, Suffolk, you see houses that have property behind them. They're putting pools. I've seen tennis courts. I've seen permanent structures on state land.
County land, state
County land,
So-
state
So
land.
if you're,
Yeah.
so I have,
I've seen it many, many
I
times.
had a situation where I had clients going to put an addition on their house, and when they bought, I didn't represent them when they bought their house, but they used an old survey and just had a survey inspection to make it pass for title. And when they had the new survey done, they saw that their pool and like a whole bunch of other things were on the property of, I think it was the town of Islip. And if they had gotten a survey, they would have seen that, oh my goodness, we don't own, the 50 feet behind our house. We own the 20 feet and our pool is half
God.
on the Islip property. So that's one of the things too, that we try to tell our clients, that use free
Get
land title.
a new
Get a new
survey.
survey because, they're spending all this money, whatever it is on a house, spend the extra $700, get the new survey.
Is that how much a survey is, give or
Yeah,
take?
I would say average,
Depending
an
on
average
the
lot.
house
It depends.
size.
It
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah,
But let's say 600 to 1,000,
yeah,
maybe
somewhere in
1,200.
there. Yeah, pushing it. It was a really large parcel. It's worth every penny because you use these old surveys. You don't know if the fences are the same. You don't know what's happened. Since 20 years ago when they made the survey. So it's just so important. Get a new
Agreed.
survey. Get
Right.
a
Yeah.
new survey.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'd be sweating if I found out my pool is on state property or
and
anything
these
on
poor
anyone's
people.
property. I'd be like,
But
wow.
even to
Yeah.
your point about fences, so much changes. People get a fence, they put it down, they move, vinyl fence, chain link fence, and we need to know exactly where those fences are, and it's for your defense.
Yeah.
Because if that's
For your benefit.
it's for your
Yeah.
benefit. If it's not where it should be, we have to let you know that, and let your lawyer can, then turn around and advise his client. This may or may not be a problem.
So tell
Have
me
everything
this.
on record.
So I had 2 surveys done on a property. Both were different. They were different. One was 3 feet off of the other one. And the buyer was like, I'm not using the other survey. He wanted the survey that he had done.
I
So
remember this.
The seller's like, absolutely not. and we had to go next door, get a fence affidavit, and do all of this. But they were so off. So what's going on with that? What happens when there's two survey companies?
Typically, I mean, when I've seen
Why does that happen? You can't answer. You're not a
Yeah,
surveyor.
I'm not a surveyor. I can't answer. What they tell me, it's like the different way they position their property,
monument.
or their monument, how they monument the different. Like, do they use true north, or they're using magnetic north, or there's all these kinds of different things that they've told me. But in those situations, I've gone to the surveyors. Like, I've sent the surveyor the other survey and saying, look, this is very different, and it's creating issues here. What's going on? What's right? And
Is that like a debate then between two different surveyors on how to do it?
I think
Difference of opinion.
Yeah.
difference of opinion. Sometimes
Error.
it has been an error, and then they correct it.
Yeah.
But I guess depending on where you sent those, their gear there,
Right.
could be different.
Yeah. I always see on the borders, these people, the owners put a little stake.
You can stake when
and
you
then-
have your new survey done.
Yeah.
You can have a stake. You can have a permanent, they're wood stakes, or you can have concrete monuments put in,
Yeah.
permanently monumenting the corners of, or whatever the boundary line of your property is. They do that when they're putting in fences.
Yeah.
It's a great idea,
Right?
you know,
Yeah,
because it's a
people don't do it.
visual. Don't forget, a record line it's an invisible line. You can show me it's a line on a survey, but when the surveyor goes out, obviously they know how to, shoot a line. They do that, but when they stake it, the fence company can visually actually see where that fence is supposed to run.
And it helps them greatly to just get the job done on a better note
Well,
instead of messing
we had
up.
a property upstate. We had 21 acres and up near Ellenville, and it was all done in the 1800s. So the stones were actual stones from the 1800s with monument markers in them. It was really incredible that they were still using that as the markers. And that's, I would assume, how you would do it today. You would leave that permanent marker. I don't see it most of the time on somebody's property, but upstate was really interesting. They had several different lines on each acre, so you could see it, and they were permanently marked with stones around it. So it was clear and concise. It was very
Well, the meets
interesting.
and bounds, the description of the property, which is reflected on the survey and on your deed, should technically never change. It's 60 by 100 forever and ever and ever and ever, unless you subdivide it or acquire the lot next door to you and you make it bigger. So those meets and bounds never change, or should never change. But we recently had a transaction in Brooklyn, a pretty large commercial deal, where the buildings left a 2-inch gap, a gore, between what they're claiming is building A and building B. So who owned that 2-inch gap? And, we did Nicole did, I did a lot of research on it. And it was really very, very difficult to figure out because it went back to the 1870s. What happened? Where over the course of time, was it on the filed map? Was it on the tax map? Did this 2-inch, look, 2.5 inches?
Yeah, it was 2.5 inches.
2.5 inches. Who owned it? So we later found out that at some point there was a party wall that ran between the two buildings.
And one building
Yeah, they
took
ran
their party wall.
Yeah, they ran in the descriptions. Ran to the party.
To the party
walls.
walls. So when you took the party wall down, I mean, it sounds crazy that it was only 2.5 inches, but you wound up with a gap.
So
Yeah.
explain a party wall. That's another thing that's important. Brooklyn, Manhattan,
Yeah,
these are
in the
very
city,
common
yeah.
terms. But here on Long
An
Island,
attached dwelling.
Yeah, it's where they share a common wall. So typically with title, we accept the rights of the the other owner, to use and maintain the party wall. But yeah, they can be, a lot of times there might be a party wall agreement recorded, with everybody's rights and responsibilities and, with it. But yeah, that's
Right.
Yeah,
Common
more
in
in the city.
common in the city, but even out here in Long Island, when you have a housing development unit, that they have these attached dwellings,
townhouses.
Townhouses.
they'll have a party wall.
Or like
And
the
same-
Huntington Village, those villages that have
Party wall.
basically everything
is attached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So both sides would be responsible to, or have the right to maintain it or have access to it.
2.5 inches.
Yeah,
2.5 inches.
It's very important in the city.
You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
no idea what that 2.5 inches was on this deal.
They're like millions and millions of dollars.
It could be for 1,000 feet. You know, that adds up.
Yeah.
It ran,
Yeah, it ran. I don't remember how. Maybe at
but
least
the
200.
point is like a perfect example of 2.5 inches in our world is like,
Yeah.
in that world, it was who owns that 2.5 inches? Him or him? And who has the right to that land? And that's what title insurance will tell you. Who's got the right? Who owns it? Who's got the right to it?
How long did it take for you to be able to find that out and dig through all of that documentation? And
We had a very good examiner. Who
Yeah.
actually got it back to us pretty quickly.
wow.
Yeah. So.
Examine it from what, the city?
Yeah, from so with the title way we prepare titles, we have examiners that go to the counties, to the clerks' offices, and search the record. So one of the examiner we had in the city was very good. Was able to get it pretty quick for us. So that
And not
was-
everything is digital. They are now, but some of these books, when you go back even to the 1800s, you go back to microfilm and microfiche. Literally, these are handwritten documents, longhand. John Hancock. Dated 1877, and when you look, but those documents are the genesis of where the title begins.
It really is amazing.
That's amazing.
I don't know if you ever seen a cat card. Like, I've been in buildings in Manhattan, and I've gone to the building department, and they have drawings from the 1860s, 1870s.
The Sanborn maps.
A man would come in, or a woman, but most cases it was a man, and they would draw this building pretty much freehand almost, with and it was amazing the way they did it. And those are still accurate to this day.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
There was one land surveyor. His name was Lovell Belcher. That was the company. And Lovell
Most
Belcher,
famous in the world, probably.
famous, the oldest land surveyor in Manhattan or in the boroughs, but specifically in Manhattan. He did everything, I think, from literally the mid 1800s when they started making surveys and putting them of record and transferring properties. And we see them now, new companies bought them, but we'll see surveys, again, late 1800s, early 1900s, and we rely on that information. And you say, how can that still be accurate in 2024? Well, that's what we have to make sure.
And you know what's interesting? Landlords, a good landlord in Brooklyn, Queens, or Manhattan, they actually could use those because they would do those drawings and show that there were apartments in the basement. And legally, you're not allowed to have apartments in the basement, but that would allow you to put a duplex down and put a full bathroom down there. So landlords, if they read those surveys, those cat cards right, they can actually put bathrooms in the basement that aren't allowed now, but they were as of right then. So you can go and do that. So sometimes it's good for a landlord to look at that.
Would it be like grandfathered in then?
Yeah, it's
In a way,
grandfathered. And
yeah.
you could argue the case that it's always been there. So, and that's something that we used to use a lot in our cases in Manhattan. So,
Wow, that's very interesting.
Title insurance is really like Chris said before. People know title insurance. What's title insurance? It's an anomaly. It's a weird thing. You cannot close without it. And the reason that it's important is it does protect the buyer from inheriting anybody else's problems. Nobody wants to buy this great new house in Dix Hills and find out that your seller had a $50,000 Amex judgment, and that will stay on the property. They record it against the property so that it guarantees payment.
and mechanics liens, right? That's an
Mechanics
important one.
It's a big one, yeah.
Mechanics
So somebody
liens on
did
new
construction.
The contractor doesn't pay the subcontractor, and he files a mechanics lien. And the building owner says, but you were supposed to put 3 coats of paint on the wall and you never did it, and it was shoddy work. I'm not paying you. He says, well, then I'm filing a mechanics lien. And in our world, a mechanics lien, a mortgage, a tax lien are called foreclosable instruments. If you can foreclose on it and take a priority lien position over the bank, we need to know that. It's really important, and you probably cannot close without addressing that. Lien position in our, in title insurance, Chase is going to lend you $1 million. They want to make sure they are the first ones that get paid back. And nobody's going to be paid back or compromise being paid because of a mechanics lien. You don't pay your taxes, get a tax lien. The county can take your property.
Yeah.
So many people in the city used to, even anywhere, not just the city, they'd buy lots of land. You know, they'd buy it, leave it vacant forever, and they'd forget they even had it, or forget that they had to pay taxes, or never got the tax bill because they live in Brooklyn and the property was in Mauritius. So what happens when it goes unpaid for all those years? Suffolk County files a tax lien. You probably don't even know, that, and they foreclose on the property. Now, if there's no mortgage on it, no problem. You just lose your land. But if there's a mortgage on a property and any one of these potential liens cuts in front and takes a priority, this is where title insurance definitely steps in and says, no, you can't close.
Yeah.
Especially mechanics liens, because even if it's just one contractor that files, once that one contractor files, it basically sets
file
up that everybody else can file,
behind.
even if they're like late filing. So,
Oh, wow. So it can just
it can
stack
just,
up.
Yeah, that's what
Wow.
they do. You can line it behind that one lien.
So so we never close if there's a mechanics lien, because there's no way we could ever have priority for the buyer or for the bank.
So I want to talk about that, about paying your taxes. So I had a great Uncle Joe, and he owned about 30 acres in Youngsville, New York, upstate New York. And my family had it. My father's family had it for, 30 years, whatever. And he kept saying, this land is great. I own it free and clear. I don't have any taxes. They never asked me to pay the taxes. And so this is fantastic. And the taxes were probably like $1,000 for 30 acres a year, maybe. And one day he goes up there. There's a house on it.
Right.
It was a little bit off.
And he said, what are you doing on my house? And they said, sorry, this is our house now. You lost it. You didn't pay the taxes. What do you mean I don't pay the taxes?
Right.
So
That's right.
very important.
Yeah, it's very important to pay your taxes.
And very important to pay your taxes. Exactly.
What about
And your water bill.
yeah.
That's true.
What about HOA? I always see like people stacking up HOA. Would that do anything? They would
Yes.
just do a lien.
Same thing. Your condo lien, an HOA lien, you have to pay them.
Yeah.
Again, they can become a priority lien, and they can foreclose on your interest in your apartment.
How does lien go? So who's the first lien, second lien, third lien? How does that work?
Typically, it depends on when they were recorded. So in New York, it's first recorded.
First in, first out.
Yeah, has the priority. It doesn't matter the date. It's recording. So,
Well, I mean, a mortgage, is that first lien, or taxes are first lien?
well, taxes would be the first lien. They could. So typically, depending on the jurisdiction, so it changes from county.
So
to
real
county.
estate taxes, to be clear.
Yeah, real
Correct.
estate taxes. Yeah.
Would be number one.
Yep.
Number two, mortgage.
Typically,
Yeah.
when it comes to what we see in title reports.
How about federal state taxes, like IRS taxes?
It depends, again, when these liens were filed. So if your mortgage was filed, first, and then you have your, New York State tax lien, your federal tax liens that would have priority after. So if there was a foreclosure situation, in the foreclosure, they would have to, serve those creditors, whoever has an interest in the property, a judgment interest or other interest in the property. They all have to be served as part of litigation. They can appear, come in to get surplus monies if there's any. But it just depends on when things are recorded, and then, mostly.
Everybody leaves the closing. Everyone's great. Galluzzos give out bottles of wine. Everyone's happy. It's all great. But we take these documents back to our office. We process them. And most importantly, we record documents. It is critical that these documents are recorded in a timely fashion. Your deed has to be recorded in the state of New York within 15 days. If not, it may be subject to penalty, which would then fall on the
For
seller.
transfer tax
Yeah.
penalties. So you have to pay that actually.
Yep.
Yeah, within that time
And
frame.
the mortgage as well. You have to get that mortgage on right away, because my obligation, the two policies that are delivered at the closing, one to you. I did your closing.
Yes, you did.
So one to you as the buyer, and then for your bank. So when we delivered that I think we closed in this building.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
actually
down the hallway.
right down the hallway.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I gave that policy to the bank, it's the same obligation. We protected you. but I protected them. And my obligation to them is to put them in first lien position. So we have to take that document and make sure it's in recordable form, that it is clear, it is notarized, it has all the bells and whistles for Suffolk County, and then I have to get it to Suffolk County. Has been.
Well, that's their part. Because that could take upwards of 5-6 months, I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the
yeah.
problem is we present it for recording. Look, that's all
But
I
at least
can
it's
do.
done.
Yeah.
I
It's
present
official.
Yeah,
It's official.
Yeah. And we insure it. We insure
Yeah.
the mortgage as the first lien. We insure the homeowner as, the
There's
insured
a-
buyer.
there's a
1
gap.
to 15 days, you got it insured. It's done.
Correct.
Suffolk County, it could take months.
It could, to actually get the documents
Or
of
any
record. And,
Right. It's been a challenge, and we work diligently with the County of Suffolk to make sure that these are recorded. You can e-record now, which is great. Back in the day, we would walk in with a document and a check and drop it off. You still can, and hope that somebody has it and reviews it and gets on. Now we can e-file them. We
Yeah.
upload them onto an online portal, and I think it's been a great change in all the recording for the counties, not only Suffolk. But if it gets rejected, you have to make sure that I get that rejection back, and I go back and go, hey, Christo, we need one more signature,
Yeah.
as an example. You have to make sure that you do that, because if your mortgage doesn't get on or there is a delay, what happens if you go out and go, hey, we're going to take out a line of credit, and you go and record that mortgage, and that mortgage gets recorded before ours?
Yeah, that would, then that affects the priority of the mortgage, and we're ensuring that the first mortgage.
Cardinal's not going to be too happy.
Yeah.
That's how we got was, had priority. So then that would be an issue. And that, again, that's where title insurance would kick in. Sometimes things happen, like that, and just have to kind of deal with it. And hopefully there's never a foreclosure situation
Right.
Yep.
when it comes to that.
We're going to have to
Yeah, we have to
end
end
this here. This
but
has been
that was
fantastic.
very nice and informative, guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you for tuning in to another enlightening episode of Helping Homes Find Their People with the Galluzzo Team. We hope you've gained valuable insights into the world of real estate and title agencies from our discussion with Helen Manfre and Nicole Palumbo. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations as we continue on our journey of helping homes find their perfect match. Until next time, take care and happy home hunting.